Lately I've been watching a lot of movies, and I thought that it could be interesting to talk about every movie that I watched in May. First up, I watched The Ornithologist by João Pedro Rodrigues. This was released in 2016 and it's a Portuguese drama. I didn't know going in, but this is meant to parallel the life of some saint. I don't really understand any of it, but it was still visual enough that I could enjoy this, and the mystery of it all made it a bit more enjoyable. This movie started out pretty good, and then I started to get a bit bored just because of how confused I was, and then I got really sick, and then right at the end, it was just fucking stupid. I was like, oh, why was the ending so dumb? And maybe if I knew anything about religion, I would have understood more, but I don't, so I didn't. And that made it a bit less enjoyable. I don't have too much to say about this since I watched it at the start of last month and I didn't write any notes. But if you're in the mood for something a bit different, then this could be pretty good. But I don't know, it just didn't hit for me. And it wasn't my favourite. So I'm giving this a 3.5 out of 5. Next up, we had Jonah Hill's 2018 coming of age skater drama, mid-90s. When this was in production and about to come out, I wasn't sure what to think. And I'm sure everybody felt the same. Like, it's pretty weird to think of Jonah Hill directing something pretty serious. I was looking forward to it, and I've been meaning to watch it for ages. And I finally sat down, and I'm still not sure what to think. On one hand, I liked the choice of a 4:3 aspect ratio. That was pretty awesome. This film looks good the whole way through, and you can tell by any shot that it's LA in the 90s, which is a massive compliment to this film. But there was a lot of other things that I really fucking hated about it. I thought that the diegetic soundtrack was just too good. Like, not everybody in the 90s would have been listening to music that is this critically and publicly successful. It just seems like everything in this movie is Wu-Tang Clan or some awesome cartoon from the 90s. And it'd be like if you made a movie called Mid-2010s and the only thing that anybody listened to was My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Blonde, and everybody's favorite movie was Parasite. Like, it just doesn't seem realistic. Obviously, all those things are successful, but there's other less fashionable things that everybody is consuming. I get the reason why, but it just was annoyed me the entire movie. All the bands like Wu-Tang Clan, Gang Starr, Mobb Deep, they're all East Coast, and it doesn't make sense for all this East Coast shit to be in this West Coast movie. Jonah was born in LA. This movie set in LA. Why is there so much East Coast shit? It's super, super obvious that this film took a lot of inspiration from Kids, the movie, not the demographic, but with its setting and its skateboarding and all of its themes and its plot. I think it's intended as a bit of a spiritual successor to that movie, but at that point, this is a lot less good than that movie, and I started to question, why am I not just rewatching Kids instead of Jonah Hill's weird, good but pretty amateurish feeling skater drama? Like, why am I not just watching Kids? A couple of the characters were really likable, and some of them were really relatable to people that I've met and that I've known, which was really interesting to see, and something that surprisingly doesn't happen very often in teen movies. So that was great to see, and that was probably the biggest highlight. It's clear to see that Jonah is passionate about this story, this setting, and directing as an art form. But I just feel like the main kid's performance just wasn't working, and some of the writing was just too hard to take seriously, and that kind of ruined it for me. And it's interesting to see somebody like Jonah Hill tackle something like this. I really liked the choice to put it in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and this was a unique watch, but it just, I don't know, something about it is off. I wasn't really that into this. I'm giving it a 3. Next up, I watched Honey Boy, which was released last year, directed by Elmer Harrell, and written semi-autobiographically by Shia LaBeouf. I didn't realize when I watched this, but it was quite similar to mid-90s in its setting, its themes, and it shares one of the same actors. However, I thought this was a lot more interesting, a lot more well-handled than mid-90s, No disrespect to Jonah or that film. It kind of ruined all the memes and all the jokes about Shia LaBeouf. This was a pretty heavy movie. We won't get into spoilers or anything, but this was pretty sad. This was an L. I don't have any real connection to Shia LaBeouf. I haven't seen the Transformers movies. I never watched Even Stevens as a kid, but even so, it was interesting, kind of more backstory of it. However, I wish like Beans from Even Stevens. If Beans from Even Stevens was in this, I would have given it another star, a 4.5, if it had Beans in it. So Shia LaBeouf plays pretty much his own dad in this, and he does a really awesome job. He looks completely different to how I pretty much just picture him still like he was in Transformers. And it looks completely different. He does a great job at being an asshole piece of shit dad, which is awesome, which was great to see. I want to give this a 3.5 out of 5. I seriously think that a Beans from Even Stevens cameo would have been sick and would have pushed it up to a 4.5. But I really enjoyed this. I can't really think of any reasons why I'm not giving it higher than a 3.5, but that just feels right for this movie. I would recommend this. Alright, now we're getting into the good shit. Fellowship of the Ring. I wanted to give this a second chance. I watched the whole trilogy a few years ago, and I'm kind of an outsider. Like, I haven't read the books. I never watched them when I was a young kid, like most people have. But this time around, I really love this. Everybody's already seen this. Like, there's not much I can add. But the performances, the production design, the score, the story is just so classic. Like, it's so sick. And this was my favorite of the trilogy. I watched them all on the extended Blu-rays, which seems like the best way to go. They looked great on Blu-ray. I really liked how they built up the ring as this epic thing. It actually felt pretty formidable. Just this stupid little ring. But it actually was intimidating, even though it's an inanimate piece of jewelry. Then I watched the second one, The Two Towers. This ended up being my least favorite of the three. It's just, it goes on a bit, you start to feel the runtime pretty soon in. I don't know, obviously the sick score and production design and performances, especially by Christopher Lee and Ian McKellen, like, obviously they're always good. I don't know, I just wasn't as into this as I was into Fellowship. I normally like the orientation movie of the trilogies. Return of the King next. I could really tell that this was like a 4-hour movie. It's better in the second half, or the second disc even. But this had kind of the emotions of the Fellowship, but also the kind of scale and battles and just stakes of the second one, but even better. So this was pretty good, but I kind of just enjoyed Fellowship the most. I want to give Fellowship a 5, Two Towers a 4.5. I'll give Return of the King another 4.5. But obviously these are great movies. Everybody knows them for a reason. They're probably like the best fantasy movies ever. I was glad that I rewatched these. After all these good movies, I thought I needed a break, so I put on the 2017 reboot of Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. And I enjoyed it more than the original, because the original sucks, secretly, but probably less than Zathura, which I just count as a Jumanji movie. It was pretty funny. Like, there's nothing special about it, and it feels really generic. The gimmick of, like, body swaps is kind of like, it got old in Freaky Friday, and it got old in Scooby-Doo, both of which I watched later on this month. Yeah, Jack Black is borderline overacting in this Jumanji comedy reboot as a teenage girl stuck in Jack Black's body. But there were some actually really funny moments. The action is pretty dumb. Like, it's what you'd expect, but a little bit funnier than what I was expecting. I'm giving this a 2.5. Nothing life-changing, but I didn't regret watching it or anything. After Jumanji, I watched the German animated short film Darkness, Light, Darkness. It was released in 1989 by a director I'm not going to try to pronounce because I can't be bothered. But I'd heard a lot of great things about this guy, and the cover of this looked really crazy. It was not as scary as the cover makes it out to be, but it still was quite weird. It's only 4 minutes long, so I don't have that much to say about it. Sorry, it's 8 minutes. But this was pretty interesting. If you've got 8 minutes spare, you may as well watch this. It was pretty cool. And then Jumanji 2 from 2019, which is technically Jumanji 4, if you count Zathura. This was a step up from the last one that I watched. And Kevin Hart plays Kevin Hart with Danny Glover stuck in his body, and he does an awesome job. Kevin Hart is not my favorite, but he goes ham in this. He was sick in this. Danny DeVito and Danny Glover are the introduced characters, and they're both great choices. They're both legends. It was awesome. They just got straight to the point in this one. It was a lot better than the 2017 one, Welcome to the Jungle, and this was a lot funnier. This felt a lot more tight. It's got the same runtime, but it felt really concise, and I was like, okay, let's get down to business. So I'm giving this, surprisingly, I wanted to give this a 3.5, but on the same time, like, I don't really think this is better than mid-90s. I didn't enjoy mid-90s, but that's better than this. But, you know, out of enjoyment, 3.5. Go watch Jumanji: The Next Level. It was sick. After finishing Jumanji, I watched 2009's Nora Ephron movie, Julie and Julia. This movie was really annoying. All of the main characters, even Stanley Tucci, the GOAT Stanley Tucci, could not salvage it. And Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep was pretty good, actually. But during this, I couldn't really decide which of the two stories were more annoying to watch. I really did not like this. All of the characters, if I knew them in real life, I would not want to speak to them. I would not want to look at them. I would not want to be around them. I don't know why. All the dialogue is so stupid, and the only word for it is just annoying and obnoxious. And I'm probably taking this movie too seriously. It's a light-hearted movie about cooking, but it's just, this was like when I was watching mid-90s and I thought I should have been watching kids. I was watching Julie and Julia and thinking, why am I not watching Ratatouille? And I would have gotten so much more out of it. I would have got so much more out of a talking rat than this dumb movie. 2 out of 5. Alright, 1995's Ghost in the Shell, the original. This was sick. I watched this in grade 6, and a lot of it went over my head. I couldn't really follow it. And again, I still don't really get it. I don't get what it's trying to say about technology. It's one of those technology bad movies, but the soundtrack, the visuals are so awesome. These are the types of movies that make me hate Hollywood sci-fi. Like, it's always just the same look to it all. There's never any, for lack of a better word, grit to any of it. Everything just looks like Iron Man or some bullshit. Nothing looks as awesome as Ghost in the Shell looked 20 years earlier. This is a classic for a reason. This is like top 5, maybe not top 5. This is up there with the greatest animated movies, definitely greatest anime movies. This is, I'd say it's essential viewing, especially if you're into sci-fi or if you're into anime. Really enjoyed rewatching this. 5 stars. Alright, another rewatch. Boy by Taika Waititi, released in 2010. This, I'd say, is my favorite of Waititi's movies. It deserves all of the love that Hunt for the Wilderpeople got. It's better than that, and it's got similar-ish themes. The mise-en-scène was great. This was what more 80s movies should be like, not Stranger Things. Stranger Things sucks. But this was really funny. This was really touching. It is a bit Wes Anderson-y, which, I don't know, it's not really a bad thing, but it's pretty noticeable. The performances were good and felt sincere, which is surprising considering the amount of child performances. The child performances in this shit on mid-90s. Like, they're completely different movies, and I shouldn't compare them, but this should be the precedent, right? It would be good if all child performances were this good, but they're not, which sucks. Taika has a pretty large acting role in this, which he normally does in his own movies, and he seems perfect for this part, and he is really funny in this, which is great. There's that infamous review on Letterboxd that says that Goofy movie is Lady Bird for men, but I think if anything is Lady Bird for men, it's this, and it's just as good as Lady Bird. They're both great movies. This movie had the emotional impact that I was just missing from mid-90s, and I would really love for this to get the same amount of attention as Hunt for the Wilderpeople did. 5 stars. Really enjoyed coming back to this one. And next we have Alexander Payne's 1999 satire Election. I didn't know much about this going in. I'd seen the cover before, and I really hate the cover. I would avoid a movie with that cover, but nevertheless I watched it, and I was pleasantly surprised. I'd heard good things, and this lived up to my expectations. There's a video on YouTube that says why all movies from 1999 are the same, and I think that this is a good example of a 1999 movie like Office Space or Being John Malkovich. It has the same sort of feeling as those ones do. That same sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It's clear that this movie has a lot to say about just American attitudes, American life. I think it might be Canadian, but they're similar enough. And a lot of it went over my head. I got r/whooshed by this, but I could tell it was there, I just wasn't really paying attention to it. But this still was enjoyable as a comedy and as a drama. There was a lot of really interesting moments. Matthew Broderick, I hate to admit it, but he was pretty good in this. And same with Reese Witherspoon. I didn't watch this that long ago, but I'm already hyped to give it a second chance. And I know that I'm going to enjoy it even more, which is a great feeling to have after seeing something. I'm giving this a 3.5. It's viable as a 4 though. I'd recommend this if you're into that weird genre. It is also just a year. After that, I watched Water Lilies by Celine Sciamma. I saw Portrait of a Lady on Fire in cinemas. I wanted to also check out an earlier movie by her, and this was pretty good. It felt very directorial debut-ish, which is fine. I really liked the suburban setting. There was a lot of great scenic shots of French suburbia, and the 2 main performances are quite good again. This didn't really have the same tension or mood as Portrait of a Lady on Fire, even though I don't want to compare movies in this. But it was interesting seeing the start of an obviously extremely skilled director. I said in my Letterboxd review that it's disappointing that everybody's favorite gay coming-of-age drama is Call Me By Your Name when movies like this exist. I mean, I'm going to give that movie another rewatch too, but, I mean, come on, this was way sick. Like, this is way better. I don't have much to say, but I'm giving this one a 4. I really liked the mood coming off this one, and I'm already excited to see more and more of Celine's movies. Then I watched Heavy Metal from 1981. I'd always, for years, been wanting to watch this movie. I'm into this retro sci-fi fantasy sort of bullshit. Tend to enjoy anthology movies, and I love cartoons. I was hyped for this one, but like any anthology movie, there's a few that are really good and a few that are just so shit. A few of these were just really boring. I fell asleep around the 80-minute mark, I think, and I was dozing off before that, so I'll probably rewatch this and hopefully get a better grasp on the second half. But I really liked the first story and the one set in a fighter jet, I think. I think those 2 were my favorites. If you haven't seen this and you don't know anything about it, the only thing you need to know is that Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly have the poster in their bedroom in Step Brothers. But this movie, it's weird. It's such a niche and specific and dead by now aesthetic with this retro sci-fi, progressive rock, weird, just album sleeve, nostalgic, Step Brothers aesthetic. And it's kind of sleazy. Like, there's a lot of gratuitous scenes in this, which brings it down, but given the content of the magazine that this is based on, that shouldn't be a surprise, but was kind of a shitty aspect to this movie. Another disappointing aspect was the soundtrack. I mean, this film's title is Heavy Metal, and the only thing in it is generic, like forgettable. I don't even remember what was in it. Classic rock. That was such a letdown. I was expecting at least an awesome soundtrack. Whatever. If you're not sure about this, I'd say just watch the first short story, and you know if you're going to be or not. There's lots of like ray guns and people melting, and it's really stupid. After watching this, I was surprised to learn that there's a lot of recognizable people in it. Squidward is in this. Eugene Levy from Cheer by the Dozen 2 is in this. Uncle Buck is in this. And probably somebody else that I'm forgetting. Which is weird for those people to be in such a lowbrow movie. I think that this movie really appeals to their niche, and I admire it for that. But it also makes it kind of hard to get into somehow. But if you're into that sort of thing, I'd recommend this. But I can only really give this a 2.5. This was kind of bad. After Heavy Metal, it was time for the OG, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events from 2004. I'd seen this a lot as a kid, and it was never my absolute favourite, but I always found it pretty cool, and it's definitely got a unique aesthetic. This is really funny. It's probably one of the best Nickelodeon movies, if it counts as one of those, I'm not sure. I used to hate Jim Carrey, and I actually really liked him. I really liked him as Count Olaf and all the different personas that Count Olaf. This was super fun. I said in my Letterboxd review of this that this is like Mike for goth kids, and I still stand by that. After watching Parasite and really liking it, I thought I'd check out some of Bong Joon-ho's earlier stuff, and his directorial debut, Barking Dog Never Bite, didn't really do it for me, I'm sorry to say. This is a comedy thriller about killing dogs, I guess. It really wasn't that funny, and it really wasn't that thrilling, which sucks. I really wanted to enjoy this more than I ended up. Similarly to Water Lilies, I really loved some of the scenic shots. But other than that, I don't know, there just wasn't that much here. It felt too bare bones, just too nothingy. The best things were some really great shots and the weird score. So yeah, I wasn't too into this one. I'm giving it a 3. Then I decided to revisit Oliver and Company. It's been ages, unsurprisingly. I watched this a bit as a kid. This was released in what people call the Disney Dark Age, which was after Walt's death in 1966 and before the Disney Renaissance in the 90s with Aladdin and all that shit. But I don't think the Disney Dark Age is that bad. I think Aristocats is really good and Robin Hood's pretty good. But this was pretty bad. This just feels pretty generic. The songs are annoying. I hate Billy Joel as the main dog. This doesn't feel up to Disney's level of quality, and there's just not that much here. There's nothing even to talk about. The only thing that interested me was at the end, spoiler alert, when the villain gets railed by a tram. He gets absolutely demolished. He canonically dies, and that bit was sick. That was my favorite bit. Was the villain getting hit by a train. I wouldn't recommend revisiting this even if you are nostalgic for it. This sucked. 2 stars. After that, I watched The Breaker-Uppers, which is directed by Madeline Sami and Jackie Van Beek, who also star. I remember seeing Taika Waititi's name attached to this and thought that maybe he wrote it, but he only produced it. And this isn't as funny as a Taika Waititi written film normally would be, but that's not to say it was bad. It was pretty enjoyable, held my attention the whole way through. I liked the dynamic between the two mains. Premise is pretty good, getting paid to end people's relationships, and New Zealand comedy is pretty good, and I'd recommend this if you're a Taika fan. I don't have that much else to say though. I'm giving this 3.5. Just because some of the humour felt a bit too millennially and predictable and stale, even though a lot of it was was really funny. Yeah, I'd recommend this. I think this deserves more attention. And going back to Bong Joon-ho, I watched his 2006 monster drama, I guess, The Host. This was pretty good. It's not every day that you see a monster movie with this level of intimacy, intimate storytelling, and detail, and good performances, and like a monster movie that you can actually take seriously. Normally they're pretty stupid. Obviously, the message against pollution is pretty pog. I wanted this movie to be a bit maybe scarier. I guess it feels that some of the tense moments feel a little bit weak, and the focus is more on the family that is at the heart of this movie, which is enough to make this worth watching, thankfully. And another one thing that annoyed me is the way it happens a lot in modern movies. They just straight up show the monster. Instead of like in Jaws or Alien or something where they keep it hidden for the majority of the movie, straight away you kind of know what this monster looks like, even though it's a sick design. I was really happy with the design that they went for. It looks sick. I enjoyed this way more than Barking Dogs Never Bite, and I'm giving it a 3.5. If you like monster movies, if you liked Parasite, which you should have, go check this out. After really not enjoying Oliver and Company, I thought that I was never going to see a profoundly effective movie ever again. So I just kind of gave up, started watching trash. So I put on Undercover Brother with my cousin, and obviously this isn't a good movie, you can tell, but it was pretty funny, and it got the job done. I really like the Austin Powers trilogy, which is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I think they're pretty funny. And I thought that this would kind of scratch. I thought that this would fill the Austin Powers 4 shaped hole in my life. I think that movies like this that are kind of a throwback to this 70s blaxploitation era are a good way to kind of get an idea of that subgenre, because going back to those, they're just too old and too low budget and too dumb. But movies like this and Black Dynamite help preserve a pretty big part of American cinema, which is great. This was funny, the soundtrack's good, but it's just a pretty generic 2000s spy comedy, which there are a lot of. Everybody in this is doing a good job. It's funny enough. 3.5. Okay. Scoob. Directed by Tony Cavone, whoever the fuck that is, and released this year. The 2002 live-action Scooby-Doo movie is one of my childhood favorites. I fully think it's good. But this, and I really wanted this to be as well, but it just was not. This sucked. The humor is so stupid. The animation is ugly. The characters don't feel like Scooby-Doo characters. This just feels like a stupid Illumination movie with Scooby-Doo skin on it. I did not like it. This movie is trying to establish a Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe. I'm not hyped for it if this is the precedent. The Simon Cowell cameo is almost funny because of how stupid and outdated it is, but it just ends up being painful to watch. The humor is too referential. I didn't see the last, 15 minutes of it, so this probably isn't a very fair assessment, but I don't really care. I doubt that it was awesome in the last 20 minutes. I thought during this movie about how there was no fart jokes in it, which was surprising. Back when I was a kid, that was obligatory for a kids movie. But there's a joke, they make a joke about Tinder, but they don't make a joke about farting. And I kind of wish that they did, even though they were never funny. I just wish it was there. It feels like it's missing something without a fart joke. Now every movie has a dabbing joke instead of a farting joke. It's just kind of sad. It makes me feel old that fart jokes aren't around as much anymore. Even though I didn't watch the entire thing, I'm giving this a 1.5. Do not watch this. Watch the 2002 one. It's way better. I decided to watch Midnight Run after Scoob, which is directed by Martin Brest, who also directed Beverly Hills Cop, which is a great one. And it was released in 1988. It stars Robert De Niro as a cop. It's pretty much just Beverly Hills Cop again, I guess. It feels very similar, but it's not as good. I liked that this felt really exhausting. It felt like I was on an exhausting mission, like Robert De Niro in this. I don't know, but it just felt like this 80s movie that wasn't really that special. I'd give this a 3.5. It's not really essential viewing, but it was entertaining enough. After that, I watched 1997's Anastasia, directed by Gary Goldman and Don Bluth. I see a lot of love for this one. A lot of people think it's underrated, but I didn't really get it. I didn't really get what the point of this was. I didn't watch the last 8 minutes again, so this probably isn't fair to say, really, but I don't know. I just didn't really get immersed or get sucked in, and it probably didn't help that I accidentally watched the first half an hour of this in Spanish without realizing that it wasn't meant to be in Spanish, which is a bit stupid. But my favorite part was definitely Rasputin as the villain. Most of his appearance is from the underworld or hell, and the background design is just awesome in those scenes. And Rasputin has such an awesome character design, and he's by far the most memorable aspect to this movie. But I don't know. I just wasn't feeling this one. I'm giving it a 3. I'll watch it again someday, and maybe I'll like it more. But it didn't resonate with me the way that I wanted it to, the way that Treasure Planet or Atlantis would have. At this point in May, I felt like I hadn't seen a properly good movie in ages. So I put on Shoplifters, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda and released in 2018. And oh my god, we were back. We were back to good movies, finally. This was sick. This was emotional, it was well shot, it was well done, and it was just like an actually good movie again, finally. But this movie's only 2 hours and it felt a bit longer, towards the maybe third quarter. I was feeling the runtime a bit, which isn't a massive deal. But this really did have the emotional impact, which was great. It was really nostalgic, really emotional, really sad, and 5 stars. Actually, no, 4. Sorry, 4 for this one. Okay. Barton Fink, 1991, by Joel Cohen. This had always been on my radar for a while, mainly because of the reference in The Simpsons, where it's Milhouse's first R-rated film. And after seeing that joke became pretty funny. This is probably the most boring R-rated film that a 10-year-old kid could watch. It's a period drama, and I really normally don't like this setting of 1930s, I think, maybe 40s, I don't really know. New York. It kind of reminded me of BioShock, but I really liked it in this. It feels really grimy instead of glamorous, how it would normally be portrayed. I don't want to get into too much. The less you know about this movie is probably better, but I would recommend it. I kept getting interrupted while I watched this, which means that I'm going to rewatch it soon and hopefully get more immersed. But the payoff in this movie is good. It's borderline boring up until then, but in the good kind of boring, where it just feels like your brain is going numb and you're going crazy. I really liked this. By the end, I was like, what the fuck is happening? Which is one of the best ways I think a movie can make me feel. And I'm giving it a 5. After watching 2 really great movies, I thought, you know what? It's time to go back to the bullshit. Time to go back to the trash movies. So I wanted to watch The Taste of Scoob the movie out of my mouth, out of my brain, out of my consciousness by watching the ultimate, the classic 2002 Scooby-Doo. Fuck yes. This is good. This is funny. I've seen this a million times. It's still sick. It's still weird. It's still nostalgic as. I love it. I love it. 4 stars. Maybe not really that fair. It's pretty bad, but it's so good at the same time. If you haven't seen this since you were a kid, go give it a second shot. Then I watched Osmosis Jones, released in 2001. This movie has got 4 directors, since it's got 2 parts. It's got an animated part starring Chris Rock as a white blood cell who is a police officer inside of Bill Murray's body. And the live action part is Bill Murray abusing his body. This movie is super gross. It's got a lot of gross out humor, particularly in the live action segments, and it just makes the live action bits a lot worse. If this had been maybe a 75-minute fully animated movie about Chris Rock's character, it would have been a lot better, but also wouldn't have had as much context as it has with the live action segments included. I really liked this though. I thought it was funny. I thought that the choice to set a movie inside the human body is not exactly new, but it's done extremely well in this. And all the voice acting is awesome. There's a good cast. Lawrence Fishburne plays an awesome villain. William Shatner is in it too, and he's pretty good. They could have fleshed out the love interest a bit more. Even though it wasn't interesting, it was just super jarringly paced to the point where it's distracting, and it took me out of it. It took me out of this excellent film about a white blood cell fighting a virus inside of Bill Murray. But this was just a cool, like, nostalgic 2000s-y movie, and I think it was worth checking out. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Could have clutched a 4 out of 5 without the disgusting, boring live-action Bill Murray segments. After Osmosis, I closed out the month with 2002's Freaky Friday remake, directed by Mark Waters. This was a first-time watch for me, surprisingly, and it was alright. Like I said earlier in the video, you've already seen this gimmick, whether it's in the Jumanji reboot or whether it's in that bit in Scooby-Doo 2002. I think they do a pretty good job of it in this movie. Jamie Lee Curtis in particular does a good job at pretending to be Lindsay Lohan stuck inside of Jamie Curtis. The story is pretty dumb, it's pretty Disney, it's pretty, She's the Man, or Mean Girls or something. It's got the same director as Mean Girls, and it's not as good as that. But it was innocent enough, it was harmless enough. It was a good enough watch. I would have liked it a lot more if I was nostalgic for it, but since it was my first time, I wasn't. I'm giving this a 2.5. There's not really that much else to say about it. I mean, it's Freaky Friday. So, after all that, if I had to pick a favourite for this movie, I would probably say Barton Fink or Fellowship. Maybe Shoplifters in there too. There was a lot of good ones in the end, but I really hated Oliver and Company and Scoob, which is weird. I ended up watching a lot of dog movies this month somehow, but avoid Scoob at all costs. It sucked. It was awful. I hated it. But hopefully you enjoyed me talking about all these movies. Maybe I'll make one for June if I watch anything interesting. Thank you for watching.